Everybody say Baruch Hashem that we are back. This week in particular, it is a very big Baruch Hashem that we are back. I say what a difference a week makes as people struggle to get back onto their feet and for life to go on. I know that particularly here in the community, it's been a very difficult day. One of the reasons is the buses are for free, which causes many Jews to ride the buses up and down the entire day, even though they don't have to go anywhere. So that takes up a lot of time. You know, it's interesting to note that David HaMelech in the Barchi Nafshi, the capital of Barchi Nafshi that we say Rosh Chodesh, so he talks about the great wonders of the world, the Swiss Alps, the rainforests, the gushing waters, and he gets David HaMelech contains himself. There's no emotional outburst, so to speak. And he gets to one pasuk. He gets to the pasuk of Yetzei Adam Lefa'alei Levadasei Adei Arav. Every person goes out to work, and suddenly, like David HaMelech, as if he can't hold himself back, he cries out, Marabu Masecha Hashem. How amazing are your... why suddenly over here? Everyone gets up to work. But the great Swiss Alps, and when you talk about the great rainforests, you don't say Marabi Masecha Hashem. And you talk about the dark forests and the animals of the jungle, you don't say Marabi Masecha Hashem. Then you say that everyone gets up to work, and... there's an interesting, I think, angle on the events of the last couple of days. They say that there were 60 million people that were affected by the hurricane. However, probably no two were affected exactly in the same way. And of course, there were those that lost their lives, our tefillos, our prayers for them and their families. There were those that lost their homes. There were those that, someone told me he went back to Seagate today to his house, and he saw all his personal items floating in all different directions. And mamish floating all over the place, piled up one on top of the other. It's a disaster. I told him that essentially that's really what my desk looks like all the time upstairs in my attic. So I don't know for me if it would be that much of a disaster, but I don't know if he appreciated that particular joke. People are suffering all kinds of things. Even now, as we talk, the blackouts and the looting. I understand that the mayor is doing everything within his power to set up police in all the areas to make sure no one takes the advantage of the situation and drinks more than 16 ounces of soda or something, and is there to never know in the dark when no one is looking, aha, 32 ounces, they'll never catch me now, and again, things affect, the storm affects people in many, many different ways. Last night someone told me that his in-laws now have to come and stay by him for a couple of weeks. Happen to know his in-laws, they're very lovely people. But no two people out of the 60 million are affected in the same way. There was a story today that someplace in New Haven where a tree was ripped out of the ground, which we have seen, and they uncovered underneath the tree a skeleton, a human skeleton. And first they were scared this was some type of a murder, but it turns out that the skeleton is 100 years old. It dates back. So they don't know if there was a cemetery there or there was somebody was killed, but whatever effect that has on a neshama in Shemayim when they find his bones down here and bring it to burial. To see how the hashgacha of this storm, how it affects in multifaceted ways, in billions or trillions of different ways, individuals, both down here in this world and in Shemayim. It's almost impossible to understand. In the middle of the whole hula kaboo, there was a knock on my door, and there was these two kids, 17-year-olds standing there, the same guys that come with the shovels by the snow, and they were selling flashlights. So, how the world changes. The people that have businesses of fixing elevators and clean up places, and someone told me insurance agents, are very happy because they know a lot of people will be taking out policies, Insurance companies are not so happy because they're going to be paying out for a lot of those policies. Hotels that have been making business. It's just amazing how the same thing happens, and for one person it's this tremendous bonus, and it's a great shoot up for his business, and for someone else it destroys his business. Just how complex the hashgacha is. I went to the grocery store Monday night, and everyone was just buying up cases of water and cases of crackers and everything, and I said to the guy, the guy was working, it was really 11 o'clock at night, and he's just, the register is coming, and he says, you look a little, are you okay? I hope you get through this. He said, get through this? He says, I'm praying for a hurricane every week. He says, this is gewaldig. I happen to know of an individual who was supposed to travel off to Eretz Yisrael and could not make it because of the lack of planes. And he didn't have enough of a geschickte travel agent to come up with a story of why he has to get onto the last plane out. And he wound up staying here, and he came here for a shidduch that didn't work out, but because he stayed here another 2 days, he was introduced to another shidduch, which worked out. As you know, in certain circles, it goes very fast. But it just how complex the hashgacha is, how lives are born, shidduchim are created, businesses destroyed, all with one wind. Ruach sa'ara oisa devara. If you just try to understand weddings, simchas, that, chasanas that have to be pushed off or pulled back, or grandfathers or brothers that either, were going to leave and had to stay, or had to stay and left, and people came, and the Mesiras Nefesh, just how it affects every person in so many different ways. There actually were some people, that I know this for a fact, that for the first time in many, many years, these people have been talking to their wives and children because their internet lines are down and their cell phones weren't working. So a situation took place that was not taking place in a while. Things are changing in so many ways. And of course, as we talk, there's still many people in the total dark. I know, I just heard a story of one individual that his surgery was canceled, and he was waiting for it very anxiously, and he has to go through a whole agmas nefesh, Rahman al-Itzlan. And I know somebody else that was desperately trying to get an appointment with a certain surgeon to look at something, and that surgeon said he has no available appointments for the next 6 months. And because he could not do any surgery, because he wasn't willing to take chances on the generators, the Yaschanim were able to get him an appointment right there and then. And he walked away relaxed, whereas he would have had to have gone away with 6 months of pain. So you see the amazing hashgacha, that the Rabbi Shalom, with one wind, that one person is zaycha to menuchas hanefesh, and another person is zaycha to challenging situations. The person was saying, someone was telling me he's a partner in a construction project that collapsed, and he doesn't know what's going to be now, and somebody else who's looking for new construction jobs, is going to have a lot to do. It's the same ruach sa'ara oisa devara, the one devar Hashem, that changes in so many different ways. It's so hard for us to understand it. The presidential election. So President Obama gives a news conference and says he's there with FEMA, and they're doing everything. And somebody says, well, how do you think it's going to affect the politics? He says, I can't think about politics now, I have to think about families. So of course his Hasidim say, wow, you see? He's not thinking about politics, he's thinking about families. And the detractors say, yeah, that's the biggest politician, and that's what he's saying, he's thinking about the families. So what do you want him to say? No, he's not thinking about the families. It's like... So I thought it's interesting to note that when he made that comment, that I have no time to think now about politics, I have to think about families, that there was a movement in the polls toward him. Now, of course, anyone that has a brain that's connected to his neck understands of what else was he going to say. No, I don't care about the families. It's politics that I'm thinking about now, right? Let everyone drown, just make sure you vote for me. Obviously he wasn't going to say that. So we know really what it's all about. Still, it's soothing to hear. And I think that there's a shtickle lesson in that also, that when we scream Lahavdil Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and I say, why are we saying this? We're saying because it's in the Siddur. Am I really on the level of Amunah? But when you say it, it creates something. It creates a metzias. Hemanti ki adaber. Someone is nice to his wife, nice at home. Hemanti ki adaber. I thought that another Nakuda, which should be well brought out, which I read someplace. We know that a while ago there was this terrible devastation in New Orleans with Hurricane Katrina. See, that's another thing. If somebody said, why are these things happening? Why are these things happening? One person says because of the Erev, one person says because there should be mechitzas and shul that are bigger. The truth is, if there was a high enough mechitza and you would keep Katrina and Sandy and Gloria out, things Taka would be, and Irene, would be different. So somebody pointed out that in Hurricane Katrina, so the press generally is Democratic and they're against Republicans, so they went after Bush and they said, you see how he doesn't care for the people there, and the cameras were all focused on the people drowning and on the people stranded and the people who couldn't get out. And how strange that those cameras somehow missed the Coast Guard planes that were flying in and out, saving people. And here, all the cameras are focused on the rescue efforts, but there's still people on Staten Island that may be trying to listen to the shiur, holding on for dear life to his roof, or whatever's left of it. So it all depends what you focus on. In any kind of a disaster, it's obvious that the governments, is doing their best, and people are risking their lives to save people, and they don't get to everybody. That's almost the common denominator in all cases. So you can report on the people that are stranded and say you're a failure as a government. You can report on those risking their lives saving people. Depends where you focus the camera. So I was thinking in our personal lives also, in our marriages, it's the same thing. You can say your wife or your husband or your mother-in-law, your father-in-law, is it this, is it that? It depends where you focus the camera. There's always two sides to a story. It's up to us what we want to report on, where we want to be with it. So people are saying, why did it happen? And that's a very, very dangerous question. Why did it happen? And I've said this story beforehand. That there was once a tragedy that took place in Camp Parasha, and one of the Rosh Yeshivas got up, and he said they should know that the reason the tragedy took place was because of Bittul Torah. So he gave everyone a guilt trip, if you had learned more, this wouldn't have happened. And Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky was there. And I think Rabbi Yaakov also knew a thing or two about Bittul Torah. He's the one they say in Slobodka went to sleep in his boots because he learned until the point we didn't have koiches to take it off. And Rabbi Yaakov got up to speak after this Rosh Hashiva gave this whole fiery speech that the tragedy took place because of Bittul Torah. And very strangely, Rabbi Yaakov turned to this Magachir, whoever he was, to everyone's amazement, and he said these words: "Isn't a Navi? Are you a prophet?" And he said, "No." He said, "Isn't a Baal Ruach HaKodesh? You have a holy divine thing?" So he said, "No." So Rabbi Yaakov said to him, "From Van Veister says to leave Bittul Torah." So how do you know it's because of Bittul Torah? And that you can imagine that you could have cut the silence in the room. Rabbi Yaakov continued on. He said, maybe you're right. Maybe it is because of Bittul Torah. He says, but if you're wrong, he says, I think you have to ask Mechila from the family or the personal people that were involved in this tragedy, because you were over Noah's Dvarim, he said. Because imagine they're thinking now that if only we would have, made sure that we learned more, it would have never happened, and they're going to live with guilt the rest of their lives. So he says, if you're right, you're right. But if you're wrong, he says, you're causing them pain. He says, if I was you, I would ask them Mechila. And then Rabbi Yaakov turned to the Olam, and he gave a fiery drasha about Bittul Torah. And you shouldn't waste a second of your learning. Was it a contradiction? No, absolutely not. You have to understand the greatness of what he said. It was not a contradiction at all. Of course we have to look to make ourselves better and not to waste our time. But Rabbi Yaakov meant to say, but if you pick up your hand and say, Rabbeinu Shalom, obviously there's a reason I'm going to try to be better in any way that I could be better. That's what you're supposed to do. But once you start declaring that you know why it happened, so let me hear, how do you know? How do you know? In the times of the Nevi'im they knew, and even then there were false Nevi'im that came up with different stories. And you had to have Siyata D'Shmaya to know who was a Navi Emes and who was a Navi Sheker. So in previous generations you had Tzaddikim and then Tach V'Tat in 1648, 1649, Bogdan Chalmitsky, whom a huge statue still stands today of in the Ukraine, a third of Klal Yisrael was wiped out, and you had the Schachter and the Tazden, and they said that it happened because of talking in shuls. So we know it happened because of talking in shuls. They didn't dream this up. They didn't assume it. They knew it. The Taisus Yom Tov made that Mishaberach. So when someone comes along and says, I'm telling you that this tragedy happened because we're not careful with Shabbos, or this tragedy happened because of whatever. So, don't get me wrong. You should be careful with Shabbos and everything, all the other Taryag mitzvahs. But once you start pinpointing and you say that it happened, so there's only two justifications, only two reasons why a person says that it happened because of this and this. Either he has Ruach HaKodesh, like Rabbi Yaakov says, or he may have a personal agenda. Now, it may not be a bad personal agenda, but it's still a very big achrayus to apply your agenda to a particular situation. Point in case. Let me give you an example. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, he brings this story. He teaches the Gemara that they said to the Rabbi, he was in such pain, and he said, but there's Yisurim, we thought Yisurim is good. How could you leave us? How could you be in such pain? So he says, Reb Chaim Shmulevitz explains, they said, Rabbi, as long as you're alive, you can explain to us what the Yisurim are coming for. It's so much easier to deal with. Once you're going to be nifter, we're going into a different world. You don't have that level of Ruach HaKodesh. We're going to have to make our own assumptions. So Reb Chaim Shmulevitz writes this story. He says that there was a Rav. The Rav was a fine person. He was an Erlich Yid. He was doing okay, and he had a wonderful son and a wonderful daughter. And it came time to do a shidduch for the daughter. And the daughter said, Tati, please get me a big tzaddik. Please get me a big Talmud Chacham. And the biggest tzaddik in the yeshiva, the biggest Talmud Chacham, the biggest Baal Midos, the one who had all the makings of a tzaddik, he happened to have a physical problem that he had a little bit of a limp. And his daughter said, she had no problem with it. It's its redeeming qualities are well worth it. But the Rebbetzin said, no! And as much as he pleaded with her, he said, this boy is a gem. He is an Ili, he is a Talmud Chacham, he has such a Havas Torah, he has such a Havas Yisrael, he has such a Havas Midas, he's a Masnid, he's a Noyam, the Kedushas Torah, he's an unbelievable symbol of Zachar Nasalai Samchayim. Please, I want him for a son-in-law, he's such a mensch. And the Rebbetzin said, no, he has a limp, and my daughter's not going to marry anyone with a limp. And that was it. When she said it was said, done, settled. She said, this shidduch over, they're going to go with the shidduch, she's going to lift the chuppah and smash it to the ground. And it says by tzaddikim, we learn in this week's Sedra, also next week's Sedra, that tzaddikim are oimrim ma'at v'oisim harba, and she was a very big tzaddikis, so when she said she was going to take that chuppah and smash it to the ground, the assumption was they better not do the shidduch. Okay? So the Rav says, he throws up his hands in despair, he says, right now I can't do the shidduch, until we convince her, I can't. Now, every morning, the Rebbetzin used to come in, and she would bring the Rav hot milk before davening. And that morning, she came in to his room to bring him the hot milk, and she tripped and broke her leg. So the Rav, in a very, very nice way, wanted to say to her that maybe you see a connection over here. He stopped the shidduch because of the limp, but didn't want to hurt her. So he said to her, that perhaps, maybe you want to think, so perhaps you want to think, why did you break your leg? After this story that you stopped the shidduch because he had a limp? And she said, yes, I know why it happened, I broke my leg. Why? Because you're not supposed to drink before davening, that's why. And here I go, and I bring you the drink before davening. Many people don't drink before davening. That's why it happened. She missed it. I think that one of the purposes that it says, where it says lightning and thunder is supposed to shake us up a little bit. And the Gemara Masechta Shabbos talks about hurricanes. We don't understand Agodas Brachas, Agodas Chazal, what that means. The famous Rabbeinu Chananel there, Kadosh Baruch Hu's 2 tears into the ocean, and it storms into hurricanes. But the idea is that everyone has to know what they have to fix in their own lives. The Rebbeinu Shalom has basically told us one thing over here. Don't take life for granted. Don't take the fact that there's gas in the gas station for granted. Don't take the fact that you plug in something and there's electricity for granted. Don't take the fact that there's a roof on your head for granted. Don't take the fact that you can walk safely down the street and the tree won't fall on you for granted. Don't take life for granted. Now, how do we not take life for granted? We make our life better. Now, you and I have to know, we all have to know where we need our tikkun in. And if we need our tikkun in Bittul Torah, then we better start learning more. And if we need our tikkun in Tefillah, then we better start davening more. And if we need our tikkun in Lashon Hara, we have to know where we are. Whoever it is, our level of Yirah Shamayim has to change, because the fragility of life, how fragile life is, and that the Rebbeinu Shem is holding up this world, that's what comes clear. No, I say, I was walking with my kids today, and I said to them, Tati, how many trees fell? 80,000, 90,000, 10,000. I said to them, I want to take a walk down the block. We took a walk down the block, and there was a huge tree that came cascading down, and it missed a kid by mamash, by an inch. He went running when he heard the crack. And I said, let's count the trees. They said, only one tree. I said, no. Let's count all the trees that didn't fall down. Everyone's talking about the trees that fell down. What about the trees that didn't fall down? I mean, you looked out of the window at night, you saw these trees davening Shmon Esrei big time. You know what I mean? And the top branch was like the Baal Tefillah. Whoa. Rav Schachter Fischel once said that. He was walking with his Talmidim. They passed the swaying tree. He said, it's davening. It's saying Shira to Hashem. And the leaf on top that was shaking, he said, that's the Shliach Tzibur. I said, why did the other trees fall? Look how many trees that Kadosh Baruch Hu kept up. Look how many sidewalks that were not uprooted. Not uprooted. Today I heard this report. They said that there's a storm actually brewing right now in the Atlantic called Rosa. And they said that it's not projected to come make landfall. It would have been nice if they would have said it the other way. It's not projected to make landfall, and there is a storm, but to create the extension. We know they're up to S, right? It starts with A. Doesn't all the names go? A, B, C, D, right? They're up to S. So S is which letter in the Aleph Beis? Who lives on, ABC? Who lives on Avenue S? S. S is which letter in the ABC? Oh. Right, 19? So that means there were 18 storms that HaKadosh Baruch Hu kept away from the Yabasha. The Rebbeinu Shem is trying to make you understand that every single day is the gift of life. How many personal hurricanes are there in a person's life? So the Mesilas Yesharim, he says a very interesting thing. There are all sorts of people who went through very traumatic situations. There was a man, someone told me, in Seagate, that ran out the last minute, and when the water started crawling up, he made it to a garbage truck. And he wound up on top of the garbage truck for 5 hours, which is a tremendous experience, as you know. And a lot of Yidden came and he called a bunch of people till his battery went out, and people came and risked their lives to try to save him. Literally, people went out there to Neptune Avenue, went into the water, tried to form a human chain to get him down, and at the end he got down from what a sanitation. Someone told me, I don't know, the sanitation tractor came and would have the big wheels, and he climbed into the shovel that was on top. And he got that ride. That's near Coney Island, so how much do you have to pay for that ride? I don't think I want to do that again. And it took him and plopped him down, wherever it plopped him down, on the dry parking lot. I don't think that for the rest of his life, he's going to want to look at another garbage truck or at another bulldozer and think about it. So the trauma, it affects us. It affects us in different ways, in many, many different ways. So the Mesilas Yesharim says, when he talks about Zehirus, he says there are two things a person has to be frightened, has to be scared about. There is something called Yiras HaShaita. When a person goes around worried, oh no, the world's coming to an end. The tree is falling on my head. And along the same line, he says, the other thing you have to worry about is a person who has a false image of bitachon, which is really laziness. I don't have to evacuate. No, nothing's going to happen. Trust me. How do you know? I know. Last time nothing happened, why should I do it? He says, in order for a person to have a successful life, you have to have real yira. That means you have to have an understanding of what is really something to be scared of, and what is a fool's yira, because there's nothing I can do about it. Rabbi Mechel Zlotchev said, there are two things you shouldn't worry about in life. A, things you can do something about, and B, things you can't do anything about. He says, A, the things you can do something about, do it. And the things that you can't do anything about, don't do it. And yira, and how a person goes through his fears in life, affects his whole metzias, affects his whole life. There are people that are constantly frightened and scared. They live on worry, live on fear. That's the Mesilas Yesharim calls that Yiras HaShaita. He says, but it's a fool. It's Rachmanis on him. I've said this story many times. Many, many years ago, I had a Rabbi. There was a chaplain in a mental institution, and he took us for a tour one day. It's the most amazing 8th grade trip we ever had. And we went in, and there was one guy that was sitting on a crate, and he was holding a polka, and he had a paper golden Purim crown on him, and he was ordering everyone around. He looked like the happiest guy in the world. And he walked in, he said, "Your Majesty, how are you today?" "Yeah, today I conquered this island like a Valdik, you know." He said he thinks he's King George or whatever. And we walked into another room, and there was a padded room, and we looked in through the windows, and there was an old Yiddish screaming, "Run, the Germans are coming, they're coming, they just killed my son, they're coming," he's banging on the walls. He said, "Anyone tell him the war is over?" He said, "We didn't try." So I remember walking out of what my Rabbi said. He said that you could have two people that are insane, but one is insanely happy, and one is living a life of terror. Even in insanity, you need a bracha as to what kind of a life you live. Kal v'chomer, how much more so, a sane person needs a special bracha, says the Mesilas Yesharim, to be able to distinguish real fears from fears that either aren't real or there's no point in fear because there's nothing we can do about it. Between real betachon, which is necessary, to a betachon which is really laziness. How do you differentiate between the two? And as the Mesilas Yesharim explains it, I think, or at least this was my interpretation, is the way we look at life. And I think that this is what this storm has to teach us. You can't protect yourself against a hurricane, but you can do a shtadlis. My job in life is not to protect myself, because there's no way in the world we can protect ourselves from the storms of the world. But my job is to perform reasonable hishtadlis, and to say, if I'm told to evacuate, I'll evacuate. If I'm told to put my seatbelt on, I'll put my seatbelt on. Is this going to save my life? You know, the guy says a story, the guy was caught in a car crash and the fire was burning, and his seatbelt got stuck, and because of that he burnt alive. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt, he would have come out alive. So he asked his Rav, "So should I put a seatbelt on next time?" He said, "Yes." Because Lamaisa, we go b'derech hateva. There's no guarantee. We never said there's a guarantee. We have to do reasonable hishtadlis. When you think you're protecting yourself, then you're doomed for fear, a life of fear, because there's no way to protect yourself. When you say there's no way for me to protect myself, but I will do my hishtadlis to protect myself, and that's it. Once I'm yotzed that hishtadlis, gegangen weiter, now my life is in your hands, I did mine, you do yours, then you have a different kind of a life. So it says that a person has no control over his health, with the exception of sinem apachim, with the exception of cold or heat, because wear a coat. Or try to be cool off. Sir Fischel Abramsky said when he was a little boy, he was always subject to colds and pneumonia, and he was terribly vulnerable to it. The doctors didn't think he was going to survive childhood. When he came to Siberia, his introduction to Siberia, when they got off the train they said, "Take off your shoes and take off your socks and walk through the ice." And many people never made it to their bunkers. They had heart attacks before they reached it. So Rabbi Fischel Abramsky said, he said, "Tata, the Gemara says that a person is not responsible for his own health. Health is in the hands of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. With the exception of cold or heat, you have to take care of yourself." He says, "But here I have no choice, so I'm in your hands." So he said with his bare foot, he trudged through the ice. He said in his entire stay in Siberia, not once did he get a cold. And here back home with the fire burning, he had pneumonia. Our job is not to make money. Our job is to do a shtadlis and pranas. When your perspective in life is, I have to make money, you're bound to be disappointed because you'll never make enough. When your understanding is, I have to do my shtadlis to make parnas of the rest of the Bnei Shalom in your hands, then you have a quality life. I'll never forget, there was a time I was listening to a bunch of kids talking, pre-1A kids, and they were playing in my house, downstairs in the basement. And one kid said, "What does your tati do?" And this kid said, "My tati makes umbrellas." And the other kid said, "My tati makes insurance." He doesn't know what insurance means, he knows his tati makes insurance. Another kid said, "My tati makes signs on stores, for stores." And another kid said, my tati makes money. He didn't understand where the umbrellas come in over here. My tati makes money. Now my kid perked up. I was really listening, wanted to hear what he has to say. He said, "My tati doesn't need money." I said, "Oy vay." What's this? He says, "Your tati doesn't need money." He says, "How do you have food?" So the kid says, "We have a telephone." So I'm saying, "What?" Then I realized what he meant, because we go to the butcher, and he sees his mommy buy chickens, and the butcher says, "What's your phone number?" That's what he sees. So all you need is a telephone, right? So the next time when I go at the end of the week to pay up the butcher, I take him along to try to explain it to him that never mind that you have to pay for the phone too. So we don't make parnasa. We don't make parnasa. We engage in an hishtadlus of parnasa. So someone told me a story. This person is, I don't know what he does for a living. He does some type of construction work. Roofs, shingles, aluminum siding or something. So he says that when this storm started, he said, I do aluminum siding. He said he prayed to Hashem that this storm should rip off the aluminum sidings of half of New York City. And then he told someone, he said, my problem was my tefillah was answered. It ripped the aluminum siding off his house. It ripped the siding off his company. His garage filled up with water. And when he came back the next day, his trucks were swimming around like little boats. And all of his kalim and machshirim and tools were gone as the salt water ate up everything else. He said, I got 1,000 calls for aluminum siding, but I have no way of putting it up. He says, I daven too good, he said. Because you're not supposed to daven to make money. When you daven to make money, then you don't mind hurting people as long as you make money. When you daven for, let me, Rabbi Shalom, have the seichel to do the ishtadlus that I am supposed to do and the rest is in your hands, that's something else. Then life is very, very different. You know, they were saying that the building department is going into all these places that had the water was washed up, and there's serious concern that the foundation may have been eaten into, and the building. So there's mavinim that are going from place to place, inspectors, and they're putting either a red or yellow or a green tag. It says the red tag is don't walk into this building. You know, it's insecure. The green tag is that the building is secure, that the integrity of the foundation is still intact, and the yellow tag is be careful. Not sure what that means, be careful. Like, go to sleep at night and say, well, if you feel that you went to sleep on the right side of the room and you wound up on the left side of the room, please wash Nagelwasser, if you can find it, and exit. I'm not sure what the yellow light is. But I'm saying, wouldn't that be nice in life if we had a red light and a green light there? Don't do this, do that. But we don't, because part of our Nisayan is, Rabbi Shalom, teach me that fine line between the Yiras Hashaita and the real Yira, between what is betachin and what is a follies, what is foolish. Just saying, I'm not going to protect myself. My job is not to be healthy. My job is to do reasonable hishtadlus to be healthy, because health is not in my control. And I'll tell you something else, which may sound a little controversial. My job is not to raise Erlicha kids, because I don't have the control over it. But my job is to do everything within my power to create an environment at home that those kids should be Erlich. And say, Rabbi Shalom, I didn't mind, you do yours. And somebody once came to the Imri Emes and he was crying. In those days, that scholar was ripping like crazy, and he said he had a son that went off, and the person in the shul really hurt him. And the man said his son wrote a book for the Askala, and the man said, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So the Imri Emes consoled him and said that tell that person during a storm the apple falls very far from the tree, as well as the tree itself. My job is to do everything within my power. So when a person says, why should I put a filter on the end? Why it's not going to work anyway? Because when kids get an iPod, there's so many 10 different thousand ways to get. You can get internet for your shoelaces today. What's the point? No, the point isn't to stop your kid from going online. The point is for you to say, Rabbi Shalom, I did everything within my power to try to keep my house b'kedusha. You do the rest. That's the point. It's the point. The Brisker Rav once met a friend of his. The Brisker Rav was matzliach with his children. His friend was not so matzliach with his children. So he asked the Brisker Rav, he said, we both had little babies. And when the babies woke up at night and we woke up to help our wives, we put the babies in the carriages and we walked up and down the same aisle between the two apartments in the hallway. And we spoke and learning. He says, how come your kid is your kid and my kid is my kid? So the Brisker Rav said, you're making a mistake. There was one difference between the two of us. He says, what was the difference between the two of us? He says, when we walked in to change the bottles, you cleared another teretz in the Rambam, and I took that opportunity and said, Rabbi Shalom, please, I'll do everything within my power. Please help me have a child that's an Erlich Yid. He said, you missed it. You missed that little connection. So we have Ruach Sa'ara, Aisa Devarai. It reminds us that we are not in control of our life. It reminds us that our job is not to protect ourselves, not to earn money, not to be healthy, and not to raise Erlich kids. Our job is to do reasonable ishtadlus, and even ishtadlus with Mesiras Nefesh, and all those things, and say, Rabbeinu Shalom, I did mine, you do yours. That's what the storm teaches us. And you have a different kind of life, if you look at it that way. I did mine. The Rabbeinu Shalom knows what I need and what I don't need. More so than I do. So the rule is, ein malach echad oiseh shtei shlichus. One malach can't do two shlichus. So Rafal comes down to, the malach Rafal comes down to heal Avram, the malach Gavril to punish the dime, and the malach Michael to give the psura that Sarah Imenu is going to have a child. Problem. But what about saving light? That was the fourth job. 3 malachim. The union has to get involved over here of malachim. What's going on? It's supposed to be 1 job per malach. How come one malach got 2 jobs? Oh, we have a teretz. What's the teretz? No. Healing Avram and saving light is really the same thing. Is it really the same thing? I mean, there's, the fire people that climb into burning cities and take someone out. Is that the same as a doctor? They're both in the healing process. But, it's a shtick alumdus to say they're the same. There's no shortage of malachim and shemayim. There's more malachim than even the federal deficit. There's more. There's trillion, billion, kazillion malachim. So send out another malach. What do we need a doichik teretz for? Send another malach to save light. So there's the famous story from Rabbi Shlomo Kliger. Once came to a bris, and the bris wasn't starting. He said, "What's with the bris?" So they told the Shlomo Kliger. They told him he just became Rav. He said the father's nebuch very sick, and they're waiting for the father to pass away so they can give the child, the baby, the name after the father. He said, "Chas v'shalom, do the bris right now." And they did the bris, and the father got better. So he said, listen, Eliyahu Navi comes to the bris. So once Eliyahu said by the bris, you can ask him to do me a favor. Heal the father also. So the pshat is that light wasn't deserving of a malach to come and save him. Wasn't deserving of it. But once the malach came to heal Abraham, he came to heal light also. Now, but there's a kasha on this. Chazal make it very clear. Seif Kosayif, light was Meiser Nefesh himself for Achnasas Archim. Can't compare it to Avram's Achnasas Archim, but he was Meiser Nefesh himself for the Achnasas Archim of the Malachim. And that's what saved him. I taught that, and he didn't come for his clothes. So what did he need them? So the Teretz, and I've said this story many times, and I'll say it just quickly to get to the point. Many years ago, I was in a certain camp up in the mountains. And it was on the other side of the mountains, meaning to say not where the other camps were. And if you wanted to get to the other side, you had to rent a car. A bunch of 18-year-old kids, we rented a car. So there was a place nearby, it was called Sam's Pintos. There used to be a car that Ford had called a Pinto. I don't know if you remember it. It was a Gewaldige car. I think they stopped production after like half a year. It was shaped a little bit like a spaceship. It had a real cute shape. And there was a tremendous amount of space for passengers in a very small car. And the reason they did this is the engineers worked this out in such a way where it was very low, flat, wide on the ground, because they put the gas tank in the trunk. Which is a very good idea to put the gas tank in the trunk. Because if you were hit from behind, you didn't have to wait for July 4th to see a huge explosion. So the Pinto was discontinued. So there was this place near camp. I've got Al's Pintos or Sam's Pintos. He used to rent Pintos, and the Bachrim used to rent these Pintos, and make it to the other side of the mountain. It's like a yamta from mitten the Bachrim. You know what that means? It was the guys had it. So on the way back, there's this huge mountain, 4455. So a lot of times the Pintos didn't make it back all the way, and we came back to good old Al, and we told him that one of your Pintos is on top of the mountain. We hitched back. So instead of having a normal service contract with a tow truck, Al would give us another Pinto to get the first Pinto. So what do you want us to pick it up, put it in the trunk? What do you want us to do with it? So Al gave us a chain. He gave us 2 things: a chain, 2 chains, and a towing bar. Okay. Once our Pinto got stuck, it wasn't really me. I wasn't driving yet, but the other boys, the Pinto got. We went back to Al. Al said, "It doesn't have a towing bar, but you don't need the towing bar. You can have the chain." He said, "What do you need the towing bar for? The chain is just good enough." So we went and we connected it to the chain. We realized why you need the towing bar. See, the towing bar is a solid piece of metal that you hook up to the back bumper of the lead car and the front bumper of the back car. The 2 chains are just l'rafcha de milsa, just extra insurance. So the point of the solid steel bar is that when the first car stops, the back car stops automatically with it. Now, if you only have the chain, okay, now think about this. The first car stops, and the second car, how does the second car stop? Boom, right? And we're talking Pintos over here, So we only had the chain. And then when you have a bunch of Bachrim who aren't always the most responsible thing, and the guy in front, just to have some fun, kept slamming on the brakes, boom, boom, boom. So finally, Wasn't me, okay? So I didn't start my driving career yet then. That may have been the prelude to what was coming, but it didn't start yet. So once, one of the Pintos, the back Pinto, the axle cracked. Don't ask me why. And there's no way to tow it. It just, you could have turned it around maybe. But so we came back to Al, so he gave us more chains. I said, Al, you can't tow it. He said, why can't you tow anything? I said, you could, there's two different madrigas. There's a car that has this engine that you could drive. It can't drive, but it still has four wheels that are in working order, so you could tow it. Then there are cars that you can't tow because the axle is broken. Do you understand? We send a bunch of bachrim to carry the Pinto home, or you just may have to use something called a tow truck, Al. Now, Al never made it after that year. I don't know why. He closed down. He must have gone to something else. But I think he went to politics afterwards, but ran to some city council there or something. But experience. The point is as follows. Now, Lot definitely did not have his own engine, okay? There was no way that Lot had the schos of a malach to come down and drive him to his own malach. However, Lot wasn't even in a condition to be towed by Avram's malach. Because of his mesiras nefesh for achnasas archim, he didn't get an engine, but at least he got four wheels in working order. So that the malach that came down for Avram was also able to save him. Now, my point over here is as follows. If every malach can only do his own shlichus, and no malach can do what another shlichus is, why did the three malachim have to come together? They have no shaychus with each other. They work independently anyway. So why did the three angels have to come as a team? Anyway, what each one does, the other one can't do. So the answer is as follows. And I once heard this. I forgot who says it, but it's a very tief of art. A human being can also only do one shlichus on this world. However, the difference is that our shlichus is the sum total of all the different nisyonis in our life. When we get up to Shemayim, we'll see it was all one nisyon, was all one test. Because Baruch, you tested me in so many different ways, shidduchim and then children, it was all one test. They're going to explain to us who we are, we're going to see it was all one test. It just looks like we have different shlichus. And by the malach, it's clear that it's one shlichus. Just like the three malachim had to come down in a unit, they had to come down as a group of three. And only when the opportunity came did each one step up to the plate, so to speak, and engage in his shlichus. We as human beings also come down to this world only in units. We come down in families. We come down in business partners. We come down as chavrusas. We come down as neighbors. With the hashgach, we come down as the person next to you in shul. The hashgach of pratis is that we come down in teams. And then there are certain times in life where you and only you can step forward and accomplish something that nobody else in the world can. You try to imagine a choir, one person steps forward, and he sings the solo. Then somebody else has to step forward. So it's not a stira. Just like the three malachim came down as a team. We get together by a shir. We get together Friday night. We get together by a tish. You get together and you're icing in some chesed project. You get together to learn. You get together with tefillah with tzibur. It's a team that sharpens our talents respectfully. But there's a moment in your life that you have to step up to the plate and only you can do it. Says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, that at that moment in your life that you have to do what only you can do and no one else can, the Rabbi Shem will usually send you a mitzvah. And if you have seichel to pursue that mitzvah, you will have the siyata d'shmaya to open up the gates of bracha that are going to give you the power to do what you have to do. Which is what happened to Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu is in this situation. He is number one. He's in terrible physical pain from the bris milah for a man in his 90s. It's day number 3, where not only is in pain, he says, you have to think back, and a normal person who's not on the level of Avram Avinu would say, why did I do this? It's only getting worse and worse. And there's confusion now. All my life I want to do achnasas archim. I can't get up, I can't walk. And here Hashem comes to visit me. Should I continue now with the achnasas archim? Do you realize that these 3 nekudais represent the nesayin of life? There are times in your life, and it's mashma to say from the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, it's the last time, it's like the last minute in the world you want to do a certain mitzvah. Because you're in pain. You're in confusion. And you have a whole series of excuses. Hashem is here. I can't go do achnasas archim now. and you say, no, Rabbi Shalom, I have a feeling this is why I'm here in life, I gotta get out there and I gotta do it. Then you open up gateways of bracha. You are zeicha to moifsim, to nisim, to children, to doiros. It is the reason we as a people are here. It is because of this that Yitzchak was born. El Abakar Ratz Avram. Avram is running and running and running. You gotta get this bakar. Gotta get this cattle here to get the tongue. And it kept eluding him. It kept running away from him. So he keeps chasing it. He keeps chasing it until he comes to where? The Maras HaMachpelah. Could have never found the Maras HaMachpelah if not for that. There are certain things in your life, there are certain treasures in your life that you will never find unless you have seichel at those moments that it's so hard for you to smile. It's so hard for you to go ahead and say, okay, it's going to be okay, I'm going to keep my shalom bayis. I'm not going to engage in machloikis. I am going to stand away from this nisayon. I am not going to look. I'm not going to take that job where my ruchnius is going to be terribly, terribly compromised. It's and you're trying to be good and it's running away from you. The bakar is running away from you. And you keep running after it, that's when you're going to find the Maras HaMachpelah. So Gemara, says the Divrei Torah from the Minchas Elazar, is Gematria, Gavriel, Michal, Rafal, Ariel. Because when you learn a blatt Gemara before davening, these angels carry up your tefillos to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, says the Minchas Elazar, from quoting the Bnei Yisachar, I think. In other words, in the morning when it's so hard to wake up, and not only do you got to get to shul, you're waking up an hour early to learn, employ the power of these three malachim. They represent finding that bracha in our life. Zakti Archaim HaKadosh. That Avram Avinu said to the malach, Yikach na miyat mayim, take a little water. He said, you know what that means? The malach came down. They had to have a costume to be able to come down to this world. And the costume was called a body. You know, it's not. It was a ruchni. It's like a body. It had to fit a malach. But the Rebbe Hashem said, put on those. Go to the store that gives out them all. Is in charge of costumes and put it on. You got to go down. And then all comes the malach Rafal, and they give him this body. He goes, oh, I can't stand this. How do these humans do this? Whoa! How do you breathe in this? Whoa! Got to look out through these two periscopes and hear through these microphones. Oh, get this off me, man. Oh, we got to go down, right? And these malachim come down to Shemayah, and they come down to this earth, and they're so uncomfortable. Like, oh, get this off me. I said, does mine fit? Like, he closed the zipper on this. Whoa. And they start walking. And worse than that, there's a Yetzer Hara. Even though they're malachim, they had some kind of a Yetzer Hara. The malachim, the malach that came to Sidon, he said what? We're going to destroy this place. And for that he was punished. He couldn't go back up for all these years, because that wasn't pashut. He came to Sidon, even Sidon had an effect on him. He already was starting to talk conceited with a gaiva, with a sense of gaiva. So these malachim are saying they felt such a ruchniistic, a boom, wearing these bodies. And Avram saw them, and Avram saw how uncomfortable they are. So Avram Avinu said, malachim, I got an eitzah for you. I know you're saying yach on these bodies. Yikach no ma'at mayim, says the Archaim HaKadosh. Learn a little bit Torah. And you're going to see that the Torah purifies even this body. I'm telling you, try it. V'yitaharu ragleim, and your feet are going to become tahar. That's what's going to happen. The regel refers, and v'yisha'anu tachas ha'etz. The more you learn, you will see that limud ha'Torah, when you have a burning passion to be someplace else instead of in a beis medrash at night. When you want to open up something else instead of a Gemara. And you force yourself and you're saying, I'm opening this Gemara. When you come home and there's some bad news in the mail, and you're depressed about it, and you're disillusioned about it, and you want to open up the refrigerator and polish off a strawberry shortcake, and instead you take out a tillin and you say a kapitel tillin, you say, Hashem, help me through this. If you would know the tahara, if you would know the bracha you are zoiche to, v'yeshanu tachas eitz, it's a eitz chayim. Yikhu pas lechem, and if you're zoiche to the amkis ha-Torah, malach, you're laughing at us humans, oh, this goof. But when you start learning Torah in that goof, and you see how choshev that limit of Torah is, it doesn't compare, says the Archaim HaKadosh, to the limit of Torah as a malach. You know, to wrap things up, Rav Tzaddik says, often in life we're frightened of different things. He says, fright is a very good thing. It's like a vaccine, it's like an antibiotic. And Hashem gives us a worry or a pachad as a bracha. And his lashon is in the Sefer Tzidkas HaTzadik, Yesh dina kashi Rachmana litzlan. There's a certain din, she'efshel lahamtik acher tzeisel yaver oilam. There's a certain kind of kitrug, a certain kind of judgment that is so tough. Once it comes down to this world, it's very hard to beat. But rak tzarech lahamtikoi b'sheiroshoi ba'oidei bebeten. But this gzeira, this little storm, when it's still way off in the Caribbean someplace, you can push it away from coming to you. Really? There are hurricanes, personal hurricanes in our life that are coming our way, and we have a way to blow it away that it doesn't come in, that can change path, it can change directions, and we have computer models that can predict where it's coming. We don't have anything that can push the storm away. Yes, you do. In the personal hurricane of your life, if you take that pachad, says Reb Tzaddik, and you respond properly to it. Responding improperly to it means to fall into a depression, to get angry, to snap at people. Responding properly means, Rabbi Shalom, help me through this. Tell me how I can make my life better. In order to deal with the pachad, that's like a vaccination. That's like an antibiotic. That later on, when the tzara comes, you can ride right through it. Or the tzara doesn't come at all. I think if you look, and he says that's why, the mothers were akaris. Why were they all akaris? Because when they had this agmas nefesh, they gave the koyach of Klal Yisrael to be able to survive, and that's why they always have to go through every tzar that Klal Yisrael is going through. And the same happens in our lives. You drive, I was driving here on the way, and there's those long lines by gas stations. I feel bad for a guy. Tankers are empty, you can't get gas now. In New York, I don't have that problem because my gas meter is broken, it's always on full. But they have that problem. There's a certain pachad. We got hit very hard. We realize we cannot take, we don't know what's headed this way. Imagine, I don't want to say, but to think what could happen, that suddenly our whole supply line of electricity, food, communication is so thin. It could be broken by any travesty in this world, Rahman al-Islam. How can we deal with it? Maybe, just maybe, I'm saying this maybe, that we understand Reb Tzaddik as follows, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the slap in the face now. You realize now that your home, your life, all the things we're used to, that's part of our life, is conditional. The Rabbi Shalom says, I can take it away in a second. And we say, oh, Rabbi Shalom, okay. Tell me how to make my life better. And by doing so, we were given the vaccination to be able to deal with what any pachad is still coming afterwards, is still headed in our generation, is still coming toward us. Avram shav l'makayim. Avram returns to his place. Chazal dashen kol hakavei makayim l'tfilosei lekei Avram be'ezroi. A person who has a makam kfuah to daven, Hashem comes to help him. Lekei Avram be'ezroi, says the Bnei Yissaschar. There's Melech Oizer u'Moshiach u'Mogen. Moshiach is you call out, help! I'm top of a garbage truck, help me! When you see the tractor coming, you can decide whether you want that help or not. Oizer means something else. Oizer means you don't even know what to be helped for. You're saying, Rabbi Shalom, okay, please help me through whatever crisis is coming. That's a much higher madrega. That's Melech Oizer. I'm going to keep davening even on days that I'm not in the mood of davening. When they dropped the atomic bomb, I once read this. So when the pilot was flying over Nagasaki, wherever it was, so here he has this bomb in his plane. And it really doesn't make a difference where you drop it. Wherever he drops it, the whole place is going anyway. But they told him that pick a target. Pick a target as if you were dropping a conventional bomb. So he picked the bridge. He said, okay, I'm going after that bridge. Dropped it over the bridge and the whole city is gone. What's the point of picking the bridge if the whole city is gone anyway? Because they understood that without a sense of direction, without a sense of target, you can't do it. But he knew good and well the target has nothing to do with what's actually going to happen. In a sense, we're saying, oh, so Rabbi Shalom, we saw from this hurricane, we have no idea what we're in for. We don't know where this world is going. A world that is, let's not get into Prata. We don't know where this world is going. I have to look at the bridge. I will try to make my life better. What happens afterwards, it's in your hands. Today's the Chazon Ish's yard set. Somebody once came to the Chazon Ish, and he said to the Chazon Ish, he was very distressed about something. He was trying to get over it. It wasn't going. And at one point, the Chazon Ish said, look, you're still alive. You still made it. You still didn't go bankrupt. You're still not, He said, Lav b'chol yoymes rachish nisa. He said, not every day does a miracle happen. So the Chazon Ish said, no, it's not the way you teach it. You say, Lav, no! B'chol yoymes rachish nisa. Every day there could be miracles. Now the Chazon Ish is like the last person in the world to say like a Hasidic teich in a word, which is not the Pashup Pshat, right? But the Torah says when he sees this man is broken, and he's in an emotional state of he's struggling, it becomes Pashup Pshat. If you break this through, then you break through Nisim. Think about the Chazon Ish. They once saw him dancing on the street. Then this guy was a little deranged. He came, he was a chazan before the war. He burst into tears. No one wants to hear me sing. The Chazon Ish said, let me hear you sing. The guy started to sing. The Chazon Ish started to dance in front of him. They once came in, the Chazon Ish sitting with 1,000 buttons in front of him and threads. These two people were starting, they were survivors of the war, they were starting a thread shop, and he was teaching them which buttons to buy, which buttons not to buy. This is the same Chazanish they once found him laying on the floor, because he says that he learns until he figures he has enough koyach to get to the bed, not at Spittel Torah. So he overestimated himself, he didn't have enough koyach to make it to the bed. He's sitting for an hour looking at buttons, because he understood that when Rabbi Hashem gives you this at the moment, this is what you do. I want to conclude with a very sad nekuda. Maybe it's not going to conclude with a sad nekuda, but there were two, amongst the people that lost their lives, unfortunately. There was a story of an off-duty policeman that was in a basement, and he saved his whole family, pushed them out, and he couldn't manage to get out. And there was a story of someone that went out because he saw exploding wires. He said, this is great to take pictures of, and he went out to take pictures. There was one more explosion he wasn't reckoning on, the wire he was standing on. It was bashed for both to leave this world. But imagine one leaves this world saving his family, and one leaves this world, being a photographer. We don't know where we're headed for, and we don't know what's still coming in our moment. So one of the Arachim seminars, a person got up, he was a Balchuvi, he said, you know why I became a Balchuvi? He said, I went up the ranks, I was in a kibbutz, and they made me a manager of a big factory. I came home Yom Kippur, I was about to turn on the radio, and a cigar, and all of a sudden I saw my father. And he said, don't you dare. And I was frightened out of my wits, and I thought I was just imagining things. I thought maybe a little hashish, smoking there helps you with those dreams. But it happened again. He said, I ran to the Chazanish, and the Chazanish put his head down, and before he even said the story, I could tell from his eyes that he knew why it was coming. So the Chazanish said that something to the fact that your father was by me also. He said, well, what I don't understand is why they gave your father the schus to be able to do this. Tell me what went on in your lives. He said that the things that his father made him do, he said, there has to be more. So he reminded himself that when they were hiding out from the Nazis, they were in a hut in the woods, and a woman came at 3 o'clock in the morning and said her son died of hunger. She doesn't know what to do with the body. And my father said, this is a mess mitzvah, let's go. And I was petrified, and we walked through the woods, and I was so scared. At any moment we could have been shot by the Nazis. And my father said to me, I'm telling you, this is a once-in-a-lifetime mitzvah, and maybe our last mitzvah. And they took the body, and they did tahara, they took it back, and they buried it, and they came back home. So the Chazanish said, when you do a mitzvah like that, there's a continuity of generations forever. I know a lot of people that went out Monday night to weddings because they were scared no one's going to be by the wedding, taking a chance that trees may fall on them. These one-time mitzvahs, they pop up in our lives. It's very important that we don't miss them. Because when you get them, that's when the Malach gives you the bracha of a lifetime.